Okay, time for the weekly maintenance check. Let's see, fuel supply looks good. Hull structural integrity is okay. Auto turrets are singing. Note to self, reprogram to play Eruption. Hyperspace goo is gooing. Curmudgeony judge, bite me. Check and wait, what are you doing down here?
I had to go and shut some core.
That wasn't even remotely a good lie.
Look, I was just checking our food rations, so just relax, all right?
And I told you I was gonna go check that in my maintenance walkthrough.
Well, Comodester and I, we,
Comodester? What are you guys talking about?
Nothing to be concerned with, just a private conversation.
About what?
As I said, nothing to be concerned with.
Well, as you were. I've got some stuff to review, so stay out of trouble.
Oh, of course, I'll be up shortly, Mr. Code.
First that book, now those two are acting weird. Conspiracy? Listen to me, I'm thinking way too much into this. It's just probably one of those days. I'm just letting the stress get to me. Our adventure begins at Sweet Apple Acres, where a cacophony of continuous cobalt cocoons appear to have taken residence. In fact, these smarflopods, aptly named by Pinky, seem to be growing all over town. But even more serious is that all of Twilight's books have been eaten!
God help us!
I can already see the PTSD sinking in. After recovering from her worst nightmare, the main six investigate the remains of the books, and in one book lies the culprit, a bookworm.
That's the joke.
You suck, McBain!
But before Twilight can capture it, the worm escapes into the book. Spike then suggests that they shrink and magically transport themselves into the book, with Twilight, Rarity, Dash, and Pinky on the chase, while AJ, Spike, and Fluttershy stay behind to monitor the pods. Thus, our heroes begin their literary adventure as they enter the medieval setting of Robin Hood. And it's this element of the book and genre jumping that makes this comic so much fun. We get to see the main six in settings and situations that would otherwise never happen in a regular narrative, allowing opportunities for many more unique scenarios. The comic's pacing allows an appropriate amount of time of exposure with each story, including fantasy, adventure, romance, crime noir, and even sci-fi. Ponies in space, that's awesome! We even get some insights on the main six's interests, such as Pinky enjoying adventure fantasy, Rarity likes noir, and Rainbow Dash is a fan of sci-fi apparently, that's cool. Anyway, as the group traverses their first story, they see that it's almost completely eaten out, but Twilight gets an idea. Apparently a book she read once told her that by reenacting the story, it'll restore the book to its full, complete self. I'm curious as to what book would suggest such a thing, when honestly it could have just wrote it so that Twilight suggests an experiment of reenactment could fix the book, but whatever. Though the more pertinent question I have here is, why can't Twilight or Rarity use magic? In fact, throughout the story, they're rarely seen using their magic, which could have aided them numerous times. They pretty much only use magic when they jump to a new book. Is it because magic doesn't exist in that universe they jump into and thus they have to adhere to it? I don't know the rules of book jumping comic, you tell me. The girls attempt to reenact the original story, but that doesn't go over so well as they each put their own personal spin on the character and situations, much to Twilight's chagrin, as they ruin the original integrity of the story. Except in this panel where Robin Hood fought a sophisticated giant land octopus. True fact, the sheriff of Nottingham was originally the sheriff of Squiddingham, but it was kept for religious purposes, being so similar to Cthulhu. So after fixing the story, the worm and the girls then enter Dash's dream story adventure, a Daring Do book. Apparently, Daring Do was supposed to swoop in and save them, but they get captured by pygmy hamsters, which is absolutely hilarious. And in the outside world, we see where the other canon characters of the story have gone to, as Daring Do emerges from one of the pods, along with all the other inhabitants of the Eaten stories, which raises some questions. It's never really explained how these characters have gone from being eaten in their literature to suddenly growing in cocoons. Does the bookworm possess magic that allows such a thing to occur? Also, all the characters that emerge from the cocoons are predominantly villains. Daring Do is really the only storybook hero that seems to have made it through. Again, the comic's really never clear on the rules of this whole situation. Back to Twilight, the group escapes from drowning on the part of the bookworm barely escaping. And I guess now I'll talk about Twilight's characterization in this comic, which I do like. For someone who cares deeply about knowledge for books, it is understandable that she's upset when the worm or her friends are ruining the book's original identity. It's nostalgia for her and her life's passion to absorb everything books have to offer her. But here they nearly drown because she didn't want to hurt the original story. I can respect her resolve in literature integrity, but then again, it's a story integrity versus your life. I think your friends will understand the sophisticated giant octopus if it means your survival. And from here on out, they jump from one genre to the next with little success in their chase, and the worm even attempts to erase them for good. And so our first issue ends with the girls trapped in the void and the villains running amok in Ponyville, who are all hilariously over top in their conquest.
Echo! My name is Ed!
The group argues with each other, more specifically with Twilight handling the creative differences of this mission, but Pinkie Pie sparks some creativity and reminds Twilight that since they've been preparing stories, that they can also generate their own stories as well. Thus, they begin creating their own stories to entice the worm, parodying Lord of the Rings, zombie apocalypse, superheroes, Star Trek, and crime noir. The worm finally reveals itself, and oh my god, Mothra, it's a Godzilla crossover.
It's Godzilla!
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
Outside as the villains look for the elements of harmony, Fluttershy brilliantly suggests messaging the others of their plight by creating their own comic. They all confront the worm, who reveals he's been doing this because there are no heroic tales about bookworms. Twilight then gets another spark of creativity and begins weaving a hero story about the worm, telling him all about the damage he's done, convincing him to destroy the books, and confesses that despite all this, he really meant no harm by it, except for trying to eat them, erase their existence, and then there was that time he tried to drown them.
No, I don't want to kill you, I just want to destroy you a little. Jeez, talk about overreacting.
The worm realizes his wrongdoings, joins Twilight, and bring everything back to normal. Upon conversion, the bookworm turns pink. A similar tinting event we saw the henchman in the Nightmarity comic arc go through, which kind of establishes that innocent characters who have been corrupted and upon revelation change their ways receive this treatment. And so the story ends with the worm returning to normal and ending on a fantastic moral. This story poses a fun backdrop to the creative thinking process and how groups collaborate with each other, a dilemma that any team encounters working on a project. It's a constant battle of compromise for original integrity versus alteration. While disheartening to see the original vision change, it can create a more satisfying result. Knowledge is the foundation, but creativity is the vision. Speaking of which, the decisions the main six made throughout their adventure is somewhat reminiscent of the Six Thinking Hats. In brief, the Six Thinking Hats is a metaphysical tool for problem solving. Each hat represents a different aspect of creative thinking, for applicable use, public reaction, project facts, and the final vision. Pinkie best represents the yellow hat, encouraging a positive environment despite the critical nature of her friends. Though each of the girls has their own bouts of creative sparks, the green hat, Dash and Fluttershy best represent this element, as they are essentially the creative force behind the story's progression. Dash uses her charisma and imagination to generate the world she creates, pushing her friends toward their goals, and Fluttershy brilliantly suggests that they create their own comic to warn the others of the dilemma in town. Rarity is kind of a combination of the green hat and blue hat, absorbing everything that's going on around her and adding her creative input to the current situation. AJ wears the white hat, laying out the facts of the situation for the creative input to present itself. Twilight wears multiple hats, white for her laying down the facts behind this adventure, the black hat, the focus of negative aspects of an event, with Twilight criticizing her friends' disregard for the story's original integrity, and along with that, the red hat, her and other readers' emotional response to the situation, i.e. angry at the others' ignorance at ruining the books. And that's why I really enjoy this comic, because it relays a series of fun situations that realistically define problem-solving activities and group dynamics. The only real issue I had with this comic was that the rules of being inside the books was never really well explained, either by the characters not experimenting with the world or no mention of it at all, making some of the story elements questionable, with Twilight and Rarity not really using their magic. But overall, the adventure was great, the comedy was spontaneous with the main six's reactions to the uncommon story scenarios, and just overall a fun story. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some spying to do.